If you've been a part of this series so far, we began by looking at faithful attraction. We're working kind of through the book of Song of Solomon. It's a love story between a man and a woman, how they pursued each other and then found themselves in marriage. And so this week we're looking at God-honoring sex. Next week, we're looking at what may be probably the most important message for a lot of us. We're looking at how to fight fair. We're going to see this couple have a fight and how they resolve it, because for a lot of us, we don't know how to fight fair, and so fights kind of erode some of the foundation that we may have even built for our marriage. And so if you're not yet married, you're going to be able to learn some of that on the front end. If you are, maybe you can fix some of the problems in the middle of it. But today we're going to look at God-honoring sex, and we started by looking at attraction and then pursuit, and today God-honoring sex. And the reason we're looking at it is because you don't have to go very far to see that we're in a sex-saturated world, right? It's every commercial, it's every movie. You can't go to the grocery store because you look at the covers of the magazines. And we know that sex sells, right? So they know what to use. And so we've got a world that is pushing sex at every corner, in every aspect of life. And for a lot of people, they've begun to think that actually the sex drive is the most important drive that a human being has. And so we can see everything that the world is trying to tell us about sex, or we can go to the one who thought of it in the first place. Like, you realize that, right? Like, God is not anti-sex. It was his idea. He's the one who invented it. Okay, so let's go to his word and see what he has to say about sex. And we're going to look at 4 qualities of God honoring sex. Now, normally we don't think about sex in a way that it could honor God, but it can if we do it in the right way and all that. And so the first thing, we're just going to dive right in. If you're a note taker, your handout they gave you when you came in, you can follow along, is that God honoring sex starts before the bedroom. Now, we've been seeing this couple, how they've been interacting. And if you haven't been a part of any of the previous messages in this series, I encourage you to go to vergechurch.com and check those out. But we see that they kind of develop intimacy within this relationship, and we see that she actually has some things she's insecure about, and he kind of loves those insecurities away, and he lets her know that he thinks she's beautiful in spite of the fact that she has some things about herself that she doesn't like or think are the best. And so we got to understand that God-honoring sex starts before the bedroom. And this is something that women pretty much innately get, but men do not. We don't really get that at all. And the way we can answer that question is, when is a guy ready to have sex? Yes. Right? Pretty much. Anytime, any place, any position, it doesn't matter. We're good to. That's generally the idea when it comes to men. And so men are like microwaves and women are like crock pots, okay? That's usually the way it works. How much time does it take for a guy? Not very much. So it starts before the bedroom. But guys, we don't always get that. And because we don't get that, we don't get that. Are you with me? It starts before the bedroom. And so here's the thing, is that, guys, we have this ability to turn any statement into a sexual statement, right? Like your wife's in the kitchen and she's cooking and she's like, hey, would you come stir this pot for me? And the guy's like, I'll stir your pot. We get that, right? Like we have this ability. Hey, the floor is filthy. Would you sweep the floor? Oh, I'll sweep your floor. It doesn't matter. We can turn any comment into a sexual comment. We get that. We're so good at that. But we don't get that God-honoring sex starts before the bedroom, because there's more going on there than just the physical intimacy that happens between a married man and a woman. And we talked about this already in the series, but you've got to know that it really begins with emotional intimacy, because emotional intimacy trumps physical intimacy every day of the week. And to have really God-honoring, intimate sex, you have to be emotionally intimate before you can be physically intimate. That's how it happens. And so let's see what happens between this man and the woman in Song of Solomon chapter 4, let's look at verses 1 and 2. He's speaking here, and here's what he says. How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from the hills of Gilead. Now let's pause there for a minute, because I fear some of you guys may try some of these lines, not understanding exactly what's going on. The first thing I want you to know is this. What's the first thing he looks at? Her eyes. That's right. It starts up here, guys. right? Because we're not just bodies, we're people, right? And so he says, your eyes, they're like behind your veil. So she's obviously heavily veiled. You could probably think this might even be their honeymoon. This is like the wedding night. You could argue that. He says, your eyes, they're like doves. They're beautiful. They're perfect. And then he says, your hair, it's like a flock of goats. And normally that's not an appealing thing, but you got to know this. Jewish women would have pretty much gone through the day with their hair up, always up. But now she has done what? Let the hair down. And so it's like a flock of goats descending from the hills. It's down, and he sees the hair down, and he likes what he sees. And so he starts with her eyes, and he is working his way down. And let's go to verse 2. It says this, your teeth are like a flock of sheep, just shorn, coming up from the washing. In other words, you have really good breath. That's what he's saying. Your breath is sweet. Each has its twin. Not one of them is alone. In other words, you have all of your teeth. And they're all, everywhere there's supposed to be a tooth, you have a tooth. This is probably a huge accomplishment to find a woman or a man who had all their teeth. They didn't have floss. They didn't go to the dentist. I mean, this is incredibly practical, but he's looking at her and he is working his way down because he knows that God-honoring sex starts before the bedroom. And so he begins to speak to her, and he says, I love your eyes, and I love your hair, and I love your breath, and I love your teeth. Each one has its twin. You have all of your teeth. And what he's doing here is this. He is building intimacy emotionally before he attempts to be intimate physically. In other words, you have got to build intimacy, gentlemen, before you make your move. Because God-honoring sex isn't just about the act. And I don't care how good you may be at the act of it. If you want to honor God through it, you realize that we are people who have connected our lives together. Me and my wife, we have connected our lives together. And it's not just about the fact that we get to go have sex. It begins before the bedroom. And guys, we've talked about this already, how you don't have to be incredibly attractive physically for your wife to find you attractive. Because if I were to ask the married women in the room, what is the sexiest thing that your husband does? It's probably going to be nothing that has anything to do with how you look. It may very well be the sexiest thing my husband does is when he does bath time and puts the kids in bed, and I don't have to mess with them because they've been in my hair all day. Or when he takes out the trash and I don't have to ask him, and you're thinking, that's sexy. He does the dishes. He cleaned out my car. He's serving me. He is building intimacy with me. He's showing me that I matter, not just my body. He wants me, not just my body. That's why it begins before the bedroom. And so if you're in the room, gentlemen, and you're married and you don't feel like you're getting enough in the bedroom, it's probably because you haven't realized that it begins before then. You've got to back up and you've got to love her and you've got to serve her. You have got to do those things before you make your move. There's things you can do. You can send her a text that says, I love you. You can have meaningful conversation where you actually give details about what's going on in your life and you listen to her. There's another thing you can try. The initials are NST, and this is called non-sexual touch. That means you can touch her without an ulterior motive. My wife, Sarah, she's given me permission to share this, but she would say that this is the difference between cuddling when you have no intentions of it leading to lower cuddling, is the way she refers to it. That's where when you touch her, it's not always about the sexual aspects of her body. It might just be holding her hand. It might be a back rub that's just a back rub. It begins before the bedroom. And this is what he's doing in this. Man, he is wooing her. He is saying everything that he loves about her. You could send love notes or send flowers. He goes on and on and on, and he's very specific. He's not just like, come on, you hot mama, let's get this on. It is, I love your eyes and I love your hair. And he keeps going. Look at verse 3. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. He's saying, you have rosy cheeks. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with courses of stone. You've got a great neck. I'm going to tell you this, guys. If you have stopped looking at the features of your wife and admiring them and letting her know that you see all of her and you love all of her, and he works his way down, this guy's good, right? You're taking notes, right? This is there. This is all in the Bible. And God-honoring sex starts before the bedroom. Are you with me? Because it's not just about skin to skin. That ridiculous video we began, it's not just belly button to belly button. It is about heart to heart, soul to soul. Being emotionally intimate and understanding that if you build and make deposits into the bank of emotional intimacy, there will be plenty available when it's time to be physically intimate. If you want to know the number one reason why your wife doesn't want to have sex with you, it's probably because for you it's all about the bedroom and it's not everything else. And we're wired differently. But we can have God-honoring sex if we understand it starts before the bedroom. Here's the second thing. God-honoring sex is passionate. It's passionate because he keeps going. He doesn't just stop at her lips and her neck. He keeps going. And this is where it gets steamy in here. Your breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. You know what a fawn is, right? The picture like the baby deer. Twin fawns browsing among the lilies. So let me ask you a question, guys. How do you approach two baby deer, two twin fawns? You approach them gently, carefully, right? God-honoring sex is passionate, and it is intentional. You approach them gentle. It's not just like honka honka, not just like, come on, let's. Because here's the thing. He loved her eyes, and he loved her cheeks, and he loved her hair, and he loved her teeth. He even loved her breath. He commented on her neck. And then he gets down to the part that most of us started. And he says they're like twin fawns. If you don't approach gently, what do the twin fawns do? They're not browsing in the lilies. They're fleeing to the forest. They're running away. They don't want any part of that. And we have the option of having God-honoring, passionate sex if we understand that we might need to work on our approach a little bit. Instead of just always being like, hey, you want some of this, we might need to understand that we need to value every aspect of our spouse's body. Maybe, guys, you need to work on your approach a little bit. Married men in the room, work on your approach. Ladies, just make an approach. Just any approach. Anything, really. Just anything. And it could be something spontaneous, or it could be something that's intentional, because I know life gets busy and life gets crazy, and you may even have to schedule this thing out. But it could be as simple as, and I told you Sarah gave me permission to share low. She didn't give me permission on this one, but I'll say it anyway. It might be as simple as a text that I might receive that says, tonight, you, me, Funky Town. So for the rest of the day, I'm like, she made an approach. She wants me. That is a two-way street. Guys, we probably need to work on our approach a little bit, because that text is not going to go over as well coming from you as it does coming from her. She goes, oh, really? That's pretty presumptuous of you. But God-honoring sex is passionate. And ladies, he wants you to want him. Not just respond out of duty, but to respond out of desire. But you guys realize that this is all woven together. That you can't have passionate God-honoring sex without first understanding that it starts before the bedroom. Gentlemen, the reason why you don't have the passion and you don't have the desire in her eyes is because you never look at her eyes. It's all tied together. And he's giving us a roadmap that we can walk down. And honestly, ladies, whatever you've got, whether you love the way you look or whether you loathe the way you look, it looks better in satin than it does in flannel. It does. Trust me. Guys, we need to work on our approach. Ladies, we probably need to work on our approach, because God-honoring sex is meant to be passionate, and maybe we need to get intentional and get a babysitter and put on some Marvin Gaye and Let's get it on. Maybe you need to calendar it out. Sunday fun day. Monday morning madness. Maybe that's Wow Wow Wednesday. You could keep going, right? Maybe you got Freaky Friday, whatever. But then Saturday's the Sabbath. You probably need to rest your body if you've had all those days. You probably need to rest, or you'll come in Sunday morning and we won't know what to do with you. And so here's what happens after this. It says this in verse 6. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. I don't even really know what that means, except the first part. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee. All night long, it's you and me. All night long. That is sex that is passionate. That is not sex out of duty. There is desire there, and it is built on the trust that comes. And that's the third thing. God-honoring sex is built on absolute trust. Absolute trust. Verse 7 says, you're altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you. Now let's just pause. Was there a flaw in her? Now we don't know what she looked like, but was there a flaw in her? To him there wasn't, but to others there may have been. You may look in the mirror and see nothing but flaws. But it's built on the trust that when he looked at her, he said, there's no flaw in you. Now, if you've read the chapters that come before here and you were part of maybe the previous messages, you know she had some insecurities about the way she looked. One of them was her skin, because she had to work for a living and her skin was dark tanned. And in this time, that would have been an unattractive thing. You wanted pale skin, not dark tan skin. And so she was very uncomfortable with it. And he would love this away from her. And so now he says, I look at you and I don't see any flaw in you. Was he blind? Did he just not see them anymore? Gentlemen, does that mean there are no flaws in your wife? Does that mean you just lied to her to get her into bed? No. What it means is that when you are emotionally intimate with somebody, you begin to see the beauty in all things. You see the beauty in all. You see the beauty in the wrinkles around her eyes, because you know that those became there because she loves to laugh at your jokes. If you don't want her to have those laugh lines, quit being funny. You know that the reason why she has, that the skin on her hands isn't quite as soft as she would like it to be is because she washes her hands 1,000 times a day because she changes 1,000 diapers a day. And you see the beauty in that commitment and in that love. And he says, you're altogether beautiful. There's no flaw in you. It means that you respect her body. It means, wives, you respect his body. If you just want just a tidbit of information that will save you a whole lot of heartache, never say anything negative about your spouse's body. Because once they've heard you say it, they will hear it every time. You can apologize, you can send cards, you can tell the whole world that she's perfect in every way, but she will have heard you say, they must have had a sale on Twinkies today. What? But it's built on trust. The truth is that you get married at 25, you're probably going to look better than you do at 45 for most people. Time does things. Gravity does things. Craig Groeschel says that sometimes the twin fawns become the twin falls. And say, man, that right, kind of going hard on the ladies. Well, honestly, for men, maybe it's your hair retreats from your head and onto your back. That wasn't there at 25. How can we possibly at 45, 55, 65? I remember when I was younger and I would see couples that were older, and I'm just going to get real honest with you. I would see couples that are older, and this is just, I'm shallow, okay? And I would say, how does she still find him attractive? He's hideous. Look at him. Everything about him stayed the same size except for his ears and his nose just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. How does she look at him and still love him? It's because the emotional intimacy that was built over time, that you just see a beautiful woman, you see a beautiful man, and it's built on trust. Ladies, your husband may be insecure about something. You can reassure him. Gentlemen, your wife is most definitely insecure about something. You can be wise there. You can be wise there. The truth is that sometimes one spouse has a greater sexual desire than the other one. How do we deal with that? He wants it more than she does. Sometimes she wants it more than he does. What do we do with that? We understand this, that since God-honoring sex is built on absolute trust, that me as a husband and Sarah as my wife, I am her only righteous way to fulfill that sexual desire. She is the only righteous outlet that I have. The only legitimate way to fulfill myself sexually is with my wife and her with me. And so there may be times when, because of the emotional intimacy that we have had and because our relationship is built on absolute trust, that one or the other of us will give ourselves to them even when we're not in the mood, even when we don't have the desire, because we love them and we want to serve them. I mean, Sarah would, if she were up here, she would tell you that one of the best ways that she can minister to me and to serve me is to be available to me. That sounds a whole lot better coming from her than it does from me. Because for me, it just sounds like I'm sexist and I just want it. But that's facts. Within a marriage relationship, we have to serve one another. We have to give of ourselves. We have to give sacrificially. And over time, we have to understand that, ladies, a lack of physical intimacy is as serious to him as if he began to give you the cold shoulder and didn't speak to you. And I can speak from the truth of God's word, and I can also speak just from the experience of having been married for 12 and a half years. When our relationship is healthy sexually, it's healthy in the other areas too. And when it's healthy in the other areas, it's healthy sexually. But if we withhold ourselves from each other, we'll find ourselves fighting over stupid stuff. It is all connected. God has designed us this way. If we make it all about our sex drive and all about fulfilling ourselves sexually, and that's what society's telling you. No matter what happens, no matter what situation of life you find yourself in, you've got to be able to satisfy yourself sexually. That's the number one thing. And it's not. There are seasons of life where, as a husband, I don't have sex with my wife. She brought 3 kids into this world. I had a very small part in that. You understand that, right? She did all the work. And there's seasons in there where we didn't have sex. Didn't want to. And as a way of serving her, we didn't. You go through seasons like this because God-honoring sex starts before the bedroom. It's passionate and it's built on absolute trust. It's built on trust that my eyes will never wander to anyone else but my wife. That her eyes will never wander to any other man but me. That we'll be faithful and giving ourselves only to each other. And there's trust that happens there. You know how incredibly trust-building it is that as you and your wife grow older and she begins to look at herself and compare herself to the 25-year-olds and the 20-year-olds, and she realizes that you would still rather have her than trade her in for a younger model. It builds trust. It does. Because she could trade you in too. But we want each other. And we give ourselves only to each other. And that leads us to the fourth thing, is that God-honoring sex is holy. It's holy. Now, normally we don't think sex and holy go together. Normally, if you grew up in church the way I did, you pretty much heard this: sex, dirty, like, no. Then you get married, yes. But don't ever talk about it. For some of you, this is the first time you've ever heard a sermon on sex in your whole life. You still haven't totally figured out how to process it. And I'm sorry for that, but you'll survive. It's holy. And here's how we know this. Look at verses 12 and 13. He said, this is him talking, you are a garden locked up. My sister, my bride, you are a spring enclosed, a sealed fountain. There's a couple things to deal with. One is, did he marry his sister? No, he did not. This term, it could be just as easily translated as my equal. That was the way a sister would be understood, because me and my sister are equals. He said, you're equal to me. This would be a huge thing in this culture for a man to see a woman as his equal. my bride. You are a garden locked up, a sealed fountain. What is he saying here? You are a virgin. That's the easiest way to understand it. You're a virgin. Verse 13, your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits. God-honoring sex is holy. All holy means is set apart by God. Anything set apart by God is holy. So God-honoring sex is holy. Anytime we pursue sex outside of God's design, it's not holy. So really, if you understand this, is that anytime we pursue and take part in sexual activity within God's design, it's an act of holiness. You see, back even to the time of Abraham, if you look in the Old Testament, there was this covenant that happened. And a covenant is more than just a contract. This was a mutual promise that was made. And the way they would always seal these covenants is by the shedding of blood. And so they would shed the blood of a bull, and there would be what they would do with the blood and the carcass that would be sacrificed to God. And you saw this all the way through. There would be sacrifices for their sins. This was always a sign of the covenant between God and man. And so God invented marriage. And so this covenant says that a man leaves his father and his mother, and he and his wife cleave, and the two become one. And so you got to understand that even the act of sex within marriage, it is an act of sealing that covenant. When the man enters the woman, in an ideal scenario, the virgin man enters the virgin woman, there would be a shedding of blood, and that would be a sealing of the covenant that would happen. And they would become one flesh. God in his infinite wisdom designed it this way. And we've already talked about this. I mean, outside of that context between a man and a woman that are married, our only options are we can continue to do that, and we can sin together, or we can honor God together by doing it within the confines of marriage. But he says this, you are a garden locked up, you are a sealed fountain. If you remember in the previous message, she said, hey, run away all the foxes that will come in and they'll steal the buds off of the vine before the grape can ever grow there. And so they've kept the foxes out, and now the vineyards are blossoming. And you may have grown up like I did, where you heard, I would go to like my youth group, and it'd be a bunch of us teenagers in there, and we would hear, don't drink, don't do drugs, don't have sex. It was no. And then again, within marriage, yes, you can have sex. And what he's saying here is this, you have waited for me, and I have waited for you. And now we will signify this covenant, seal this covenant together. And he says, your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits. You have waited. And then here's what happens. This is kind of the result. Verse 15. He says, you are a garden fountain, a well of flowing water streaming down from Lebanon. And then she says, awake, north wind, and come, south wind. Blow on my garden that its fragrance may spread everywhere. Let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. I have no desire whatsoever to interpret that for you. You can do that on your own. So when a woman has been loved by a man, when he has built that emotional intimacy, when they have waited for each other, they've kept themselves only for the other one. There's this beautiful thing that happens, and it's God honoring. It is a holy thing. In his word, he says the marriage bed is holy and undefiled. Within there, God is honored by that. And yes, within marriage between a man and a woman, God is honored when you have sex with your wife. He is. And anytime we try to pursue it outside of that, we find a distortion of it. Was your body created to have sex? Yes, it was. But not outside of the way God designed it. Now, you got to know this. Every other writing that was written around the time of Song of Solomon, whenever it talked about sex, it only talked about it as a means for procreation. Sex was only seen outside of this writing. Every other writing about it only spoke of it as a way to make babies. And sex, yes, it makes babies. It does. But in Song of Solomon, you see it in a totally different way. You don't see any talk of procreation at this point. You see a husband and wife. They love each other. They've saved themselves for each other, and you just see them just enjoying it. So in other words, God actually wants it to be enjoyable. It's God honoring, and yes, it makes babies, but it's fun within the way He designed it. And so you see that happen. And you may be in the room and you're thinking, well, that's not the way I've done it. That's not the way I've handled this. I wasn't a garden locked up. I wasn't a sealed fountain. But the thing about it is that how does something become holy? It only becomes holy because God makes it holy. You can't make yourself holy. You can't make anything holy. Only He does that. He is the one who can make things holy and set them apart. And you may have found yourself because you may have lost your virginity to someone else. You may have given it freely. There's a very good chance that there's at least one person in the room who had it taken from you because you were abused by some monster. What do you do? How do you do this? You allow God to take who you are now and set you apart for His purposes from this day forward. You can't go back and fix any other mistakes of the past. You may be sitting in the room and you're thinking, man, I'm sitting right next to my boyfriend and we're like a couple of rabbits in spring right now. Okay, what are we supposed to do? Well, it's going to sound archaic and you're not going to hear it in any movies that were released this weekend, but you need to stop having sex and you need to save it for within the confines of a married relationship, you and your wife. She may be the one, he may be the one. But you bring yourself back to God and you say, okay, God, I haven't understood or at least not lived out sex this way. So God, I'm going to allow you to take me and to set me apart from this day forward. I mean, are any of you perfect in any other area of your life? You're not. I think it was John Maxwell that says that God uses people who have made mistakes because there aren't any other kind around. You may not have blown it in this area, you've blown it in some other area of your life, and you come to God with your brokenness and your sinfulness, and He takes the broken and He breathes new life there. He takes the broken and He heals and He puts back together. You may not yet be married and you may have messed up in this area. Bring yourself to God and allow Him to set you apart and make you holy. You may be within the confines of marriage and you have not understood it this way. You don't have a good sex life. You don't have it very much, and when you do, it's not very enjoyable. And you've not understood how to love each other completely and trust each other absolutely. To build emotional intimacy that will fuel the fire of passionate, God-honoring physical intimacy. So let me invite you to respond, because I know that this is a message that's going to hit everybody somewhere. You may be sitting out there, you're not married, you're sitting there, you're a virgin, and maybe you even think society's telling you that it's ridiculous that you would still be waiting for that person, and you understand, no, I'm going to hold on, I'm going to become that person. Let's take a moment and respond. Would you bow your heads and pray with me? God, I know that your word never produces guilt in us. That's the work of the enemy who would come and say, see how broken and messed up you are. You've blown it so many times. God can't possibly love you or use you. God, I know that if there's anyone right now hearing that voice in their head, that is not from you. But God, instead, you call us out of our sin and into life, out of darkness and into light. And God, I know that everybody in this room can honor you with our understanding and with our living out of sex. And God, I know that because your word teaches us that when it is lived out within the confines of what you designed for us, that it honors you. And God, it is healthy for us. So God, I pray for those in the room who may not yet be married, but they have failed in this area and sinned sexually. God, I pray that they will come to you confessing and turning and allowing you to set them apart and to make them holy once again. God, I pray for the couples in the room. God, I know this, that You want us to be healthy and strong as married couples. God, you want us to be healthy and to be emotionally intimate. God, you want us to have healthy and passionate sex lives within our marriages. So God, I pray for the men, God, that we will begin to love our wives sacrificially, and we will love all of them, not just their body, but God, we will look in their eyes, and that we will build trust by the way we care for them and the way we serve them. Pray for the wives, that they will understand the way their husbands are wired, and God, they will love and they will serve and they will give sacrificially. And God, an amazing thing happens when we will love and serve each other sacrificially, and you will build strong marriages. You will heal marriages. Help us to live this way for you. If you're in the room and you've got some issue of that, before you look up and you'd just like me to pray for you, I just want to invite you to raise your hand. By raising your hand, you're not saying, I'm confessing that I'm a sexual sinner. You're saying, Cary, would you pray for me that I'm able to live this out in my life in a healthy, God-honoring way? Just raise your hand and I'll see you and I'll pray for you. Nobody else is looking at you. I see you over here on the left side, across the middle in the back. I see you across the back row over here on the right, over here on the side. God, right now I want to lift them to you. God, you've spoken to their hearts, and so I pray that you do a work in their hearts by the power of your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.